I'm Sarah Mitchell, 34, and I thought I had the perfect marriage until last Tuesday when I found love letters in my husband David's jacket pocket. My heart stopped when I saw the familiar handwriting elegant cursive that had written my birthday. Cards for 34 years. The signature made my blood run cold. Forever yours, Margaret. My own mother's name. 23 years of marriage to David. 15 years since Mom moved in with us after Dad's death. And this is what I discovered while doing laundry. The letters were passionate, intimate, filled with promises and secret meetings. As I stood there trembling, holding evidence of the ultimate betrayal, I realized this wasn't just an affair, this was a calculated destruction of everything I held sacred. But they had no idea what they'd awakened in me. Like and subscribe if you've ever discovered a betrayal that changed everything you thought you knew about your family. My legs gave out and I collapsed onto our bedroom floor. The letters scattered around me like pieces of my shattered world. The wedding photo on our dresser seemed to mock me. There we all were 23 years ago, so young and hopeful. David in his black tuxedo, me in my grandmother's lace dress. And Mom beaming beside us in that powder blue dress she'd insisted on buying for her daughter's special day. How naive I'd been. I met David when I was 27, working as a paralegal at a small law firm downtown. He was 31, recently divorced, and seemed so mature and stable compared to the guys I dated. What drew me to him wasn't just his steady job as an accountant or his gentle manner, it was how he listened. Really listened. When I talked about my dreams of going back to school for my law degree, he encouraged me. When I worried about leaving Mom alone after Dad's sudden heart attack, he was the one who suggested she move in with us after we married. Family is everything, he'd said, holding my hands across the dinner table at our favorite Italian restaurant. Your mother raised an incredible woman. The least I can do is make sure she's taken care of. I thought I'd found my soulmate. Looking back now, I could see the signs I'd missed. How quickly David had integrated himself into our family dynamic. How he'd volunteered to handle Mom's financial transition after Dad's death. How he insisted we buy this house big enough for 3 adults. He'd said, so Mom would never feel like a burden. The letters in my trembling hands told a different story. This one was dated just 6 months after our wedding. My dearest Margaret, these stolen moments with you are all that keep me sane. Sarah works such long hours now with her law courses, and when she comes home, she's so exhausted. But you understand. Me in ways she never could. My stomach lurched. I'd been working 16-hour days, trying to balance my new marriage, my job, and law school at night. I've been grateful that David and Mom seemed to get along so well that she didn't feel like a third wheel in our home. When I'd come home exhausted, I'd often find them chatting over coffee in the kitchen. And David would just smile and say, your mom was telling me stories about when you were little. Another letter dated 3 years later. The way she trusts. U.S. both completely breaks my heart, but I can't give this up. You're the love I never expected to find. When she's at work and it's just us, I feel like I'm living my real life. The real life. While I was building what I thought was our real life, shall I continue to the next chapter? I forced myself to stand, wiping my tears with the back of my hand. If there were letters, there had to be more evidence. My legal training kicked and I needed documentation, proof, a timeline. The woman who'd graduated summa cum laude from law school wasn't going to crumble without a fight. I went to David's home office, a room I rarely entered since he handled all our finances. I'm better with numbers, he'd always said. You focus on your career, honey. I've got this covered. How convenient for him. His desk was meticulously organized, but I knew where he kept the bank statements. My hand shook as I pulled out the files. Our joint checking account showed the usual deposits, my salary from the law firm where I'd made partner 3 years ago, his income from his accounting practice. But there were withdrawals I didn't recognize. $500 here, $300 there. Always in cash dot, the amounts were small enough not to trigger my attention during our brief monthly financial discussions, but consistent enough to add up. Over the past 5 years, nearly $30,000 had vanished from our account in these small increments, but it was the credit card statements that made my blood boil. Charges at restaurants I'd never been to, always for 2 people, always during my work hours. Hotel charges not for business trips, but for local hotels. The Marriott downtown, the boutique inn by the lake, places I'd suggested for romantic getaways that David had always been too busy for. "We don't need expensive hotels, Sarah," he'd say whenever I suggested a weekend away. "We have everything we need right here at home. Right here at home." With my mother, I found receipts tucked in the back of his desk drawer lingerie from Victoria's. Secret size 14. My size was 8. Mom was a 14, jewelry from the boutique downtown. Delicate gold pieces I'd never seen either of them wear. Flowers delivered to M. Richardson at our address on days when I was traveling for work that my mother's maiden name was Richardson. She kept it after Dad died, said it made her feel connected to her parents. I thought it was sweet, a way to honor her family heritage. The pattern became sickeningly clear. Every business trip I'd taken, every late night at the office, every weekend I'd spent preparing for court cases, they'd used my absence as an opportunity. The cash withdrawals corresponded with my travel schedule. The hotel charges happened. On evenings when I called home to say I'd be working late, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my calendar for the past year. There it was, every single hotel charge lined up perfectly with the day I'd been out of town or working late. They'd been methodical, careful, calculating. But what made me physically ill was finding the bank statements for an account I didn't know existed. A savings account in both David's and Mom's names, with steady deposits that matched the cash withdrawals from our joint account. They'd been systematically moving my money into an account I had no access to. The account balance showed $127,000. My inheritance from Dad's life insurance policy had been $150,000. I'd given it to David to invest for our future, trusting him completely. Now I knew where $127,000 of it had gone into a secret account shared with my own mother. I sat back in David's leather chair, the same chair where he'd held me while I cried about difficult cases, where he'd massaged my shoulders during law. School finals, where he'd promised me that together we could handle anything life threw at us. Everything had been a lie. I needed air. I needed space to think. I walked through our house, the house I thought was ours, seeing everything with new eyes. The living room where Mom and David would sit together watching TV while I worked late. The kitchen where they'd cook together, always having dinner ready when I got home from the office. The garden where they'd spend hours together while I was traveling for cases. I'd been grateful. God help me, I'd been grateful that my husband and mother got along so well. Walking into Mom's room felt like entering a crime scene. This had been Dad's study before he died, filled with his books and his old law degree on the wall. After the funeral, David had suggested converting it into a bedroom for Mom. "She needs her own space," he'd said. Her own sanctuary. I'd helped him choose the paint color, the curtains, the furniture. We'd made it beautiful for her. Now I wondered how many nights David had spent in this room. Instead of in our bed upstairs, I opened Mom's jewelry box, an antique wooden box Dad had given her for their 20th anniversary. Inside, nestled among her usual pieces, were items I'd never seen before. A delicate gold necklace with a heart pendant. Earrings with small diamonds. A bracelet engraved with "Forever Yours" in David's handwriting. The same phrase from the letters. I sank onto Mom's bed, clutching the bracelet. My mother had raised me alone after Dad's death when I was 31, had been my strength and my comfort. She was the one who'd encouraged me to pursue law school, who'd helped me study, who'd celebrated every milestone in my career. "You're going to be such a successful attorney, sweetheart," she'd said just last month over coffee. "I'm so proud of the woman you've become. while sleeping with my husband behind my back. The worst part was remembering how natural their relationship had seemed. David would bring Mom her morning coffee exactly how she liked it, 2 sugars, no cream. He'd drive her to her doctor's appointments. When I was busy with work, he'd fix things around the house that bothered her before I even noticed them. I thought he was being the perfect son-in-law. I'd encourage their closeness. When Mom seemed lonely after Dad's death, I'd been relieved. That David could fill some of that void. When they'd laughed together over inside jokes, I didn't understand. I'd smiled and felt grateful that they'd bonded. "Your mother is an amazing woman," David would tell me. "You're lucky to have her guidance." "Your husband is such a thoughtful man," Mom would say. "You chose well, honey." They'd played me perfectly. I went to the filing cabinet in David's office and found our house deed. My hands shook as I read the legal language I understood all too well. When we bought this house, David had suggested adding Mom's name to the deed for security purposes. "If something happens to us, she'd have a place to live," he'd explained. "It's just practical." I'd signed the papers without hesitation. My mother deserved security after losing Dad so suddenly. Now I realized the truth. If David divorced me, he and Mom would own this house together. I'd be the one with nowhere to go. The deed was dated just 2 years after our wedding. They'd been planning this for over 20 years. The more I searched, the more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. I pulled out Mom's medical records from the filing cabinet. David had insisted on keeping them organized in case of emergency. What I found made my stomach turn. Every time I'd had an important work event, Mom had mysteriously fallen ill. The weekend I was supposed to be in Chicago for a major case, Mom had chest pains and needed to go to the emergency room. David had stayed home to take care of her while I flew to Chicago alone. The night of my law firm's annual gala, where I was being honored for making partner, Mom had a severe migraine and couldn't be left alone. I felt guilty every single time. What kind of daughter prioritizes work over her mother's health? But looking at the medical records now, I saw the pattern. Emergency room visits that resulted in anxiety attacks or stress reactions with no serious medical findings. Doctors. Notes recommending rest and family support. Prescriptions for anti-anxiety medication that was never filled. The dates of these episodes corresponded perfectly with my work travel schedule and important events. They'd used my love for my mother against me, knowing I never questioned her medical needs. I remembered the Chicago weekend vividly. I called home every few hours, worried sick about Mom. David had been so reassuring. "Don't worry, honey. I'm taking good care of her. She's resting comfortably. You focus on your case." While I was in depositions and court hearings, they were probably in bed together, laughing about how easy it was to manipulate me. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I ran to the bathroom and vomited, my body rejecting the poison of this truth. 23 years of marriage, 20 years of caring for my mother, and it had all been an elaborate lie. I splashed cold water on my face and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked older than her 34 years, worn down by years of trying to be the perfect wife, daughter, and attorney. But there was something else in my eyes now, a hardness that hadn't been there before. They'd created this woman. They'd pushed me to this breaking point, and they had no idea what they'd unleashed. I went back to David's office and found his personal cell phone records. He'd left them out on his desk, probably never imagining I'd look through them. The number of calls between David and Mom was staggering, sometimes 20 or 30 calls a day when I was traveling. Calls that lasted for hours during my workdays. Text messages too, though most were deleted. But phone companies keep records, and I knew how to get them. I also found something else that made my blood run cold: life insurance policies. David had taken out a substantial policy on me just 5 years ago, naming himself as the primary beneficiary. The amount was enough to set him and Mom up for life. A cold chill ran down my spine. Was I being paranoid, or was this part of their long-term plan? I spent the next 3 hours going through every document in David's office. What I found painted a picture of deception so complete, so calculated that I had to keep reminding myself to breathe. The cell phone records showed patterns that made me physically sick. Every day while I was at work, David and Mom exchanged dozens of texts and calls. During my business trips, the communication ramped up to an almost constant stream. But what really caught my attention were the calls that happened in the middle of the night, calls made from our house phone to Mom's cell phone, even though she was supposedly sleeping just down the hall. Those calls meant David was sneaking out of our bed to talk to her privately while I slept, exhausted from 60-hour work weeks. My husband was coordinating with my mother. I found a folder hidden behind David's tax files labeled investment properties. Inside were documents showing that David and Mom had been looking at condos together. Luxury condos in Florida, Arizona, places with warm weather perfect for retirement. The real estate agent's notes were addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, but the handwriting in the margins was Mom's. They'd been planning their future together. Without me, but the most damning evidence was in David's email account. He'd left his laptop open, logged in something he never did when I was around. I scrolled through months of messages, and what I found made me want to scream. Email after email between David and various attorneys, inquiring about divorce proceedings, asset protection, and how to handle property division when one spouse has significant earning potential. David had been consulting lawyers about divorcing me while protecting his assets. One email chain from just 6 months ago made my blood boil. David, regarding a consultation about divorce strategy, since your wife is the primary breadwinner and you've been managing the household finances, you may be entitled to spousal support. The key is documenting your contributions to the household and any sacrifices you made for her career advancement. David's response, my mother-in-law has been an invaluable witness to how I've supported Sarah's career by managing all household responsibilities. She can testify to my contributions. My mother was going to testify against me in divorce proceedings. I printed everything. Every email, every bank statement, every receipt, every phone record. My legal training took over, and I built a file that would make any attorney proud. I organized it chronologically, cross-referenced the evidence, and created a timeline that told the complete story of their deception. By the time I was finished, it was almost midnight. David would be home from his business dinner soon, and Mom would be back from her book club meeting. The same book club that met every Tuesday at the same time David had business dinners. I sat in his office chair, surrounded by evidence of their betrayal, and felt something I'd never experienced before. It wasn't just anger or hurt, it was a cold, calculating rage that settled in my chest like ice. They'd underestimated me. They saw me as the workaholic daughter and wife who was too busy to notice what was happening in her own home. They thought I was too trusting, too naive, too grateful for their support to ever question their motives. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I heard David's car in the driveway. I quickly gathered all the evidence and locked it in my own filing cabinet, the one David never looked in because it contained my work files. Then I went upstairs, changed into my pajamas, and got into bed with a book as if I'd been reading all evening. When David came into our bedroom, I looked up with the same trusting smile I'd given him for 23 years. How was your dinner? I asked sweetly. Fine, he said, avoiding my eyes as he changed clothes. Just boring business stuff. That's nice, honey. Mom's not back from book club yet. They must be having a good discussion. David's hand paused on his shirt button. Yeah, she texted me that they were running late. Lies, all lies. But now I knew the truth, and I had the evidence to prove it. Tomorrow, I would start planning their downfall. I barely slept that night. Every time David shifted beside me, every sound from downstairs when Mom came home, every creak of the house felt loaded with meaning. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying 23 years of marriage in my mind, seeing everything differently now. The morning after was surreal. David brought me coffee in bed, just like he had thousands of times before. "Sleep well?" he asked, kissing my forehead with lips that had been kissing my mother. "Like a baby," I lied, accepting the coffee with steady hands. Mom knocked on our bedroom door, something she'd done countless times over the years. "Good morning, you two." "Sarah, I made your favorite blueberry pancakes." I looked at her standing in the doorway in her floral robe, gray hair perfectly styled even first thing in the morning, and felt like I was looking at a stranger. This woman had changed my diapers, taught me to drive, held me when I cried over breakups and law school stress. She'd been my role model, my confidant, my best friend, and she'd been systematically destroying my life for over 20 years. "That sounds wonderful, Mom. I'll be down in a few minutes." At breakfast, I watched them interact with new eyes. The way David's hand lingered when he passed Mom the syrup. How she smiled at him when she thought I wasn't looking. The comfortable familiarity between them that I'd mistaken for familial affection. "I have to go to the office early today," I announced, finishing my coffee. "Big case coming up." "On a Saturday?" David asked. "You work too hard, honey." "Someone has to pay the bills," I said lightly, and I saw Mom and David exchange a quick glance. If only they knew how much I really knew about those bills. I drove to the office, but instead of working on cases, I spent the day researching. I used my firm's resources to dig deeper into David's financial activities. What I found made the situation even worse. The insurance policy on my life wasn't the only one. David had also taken out policies on himself and Mom, but with much smaller payouts. Mine was worth $2.5 million, enough to set them up for life in one of those Florida condos they've been looking at. I also discovered that David had been transferring money from our accounts to offshore investments. Small amounts moved gradually over years, but it added up to nearly half of my inheritance from Dad, plus a significant portion of my law firm bonuses. My phone rang. It was David. "Hey, honey, Mom and I were thinking of going to that new restaurant tonight. Want to join us?" "I can't. I'm swamped with this case." "You sure? We miss you. We miss you." Like they were a couple and I was the third wheel. "I'm sure you two go ahead and have fun." After I hung up, I sat in my office and let the full weight of the situation settle over me. This wasn't just an affair. This was a complete restructuring of my life without my knowledge or consent. They'd been playing the long game, positioning themselves to take everything. I'd worked for a while eliminating me from the equation entirely, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed I was too trusting, too busy, too naive to ever figure it out. I pulled out a legal pad and started planning. As an attorney, I knew exactly how to protect myself and exactly how to make sure they faced consequences for what they'd done. But I also knew I needed to be smart about this. One wrong move and they could destroy evidence, hide assets, or worse. I needed help, and I knew exactly who to call. My colleague Janet Martinez specialized in family law and forensic accounting. More importantly, she was ruthless when it came to protecting her clients from financial abuse. "Janet, it's Sarah. I need your help with something, and it's personal. Can you meet me at the office?" An hour later, Janet sat across from my desk. I laid out the evidence. Her expression grew darker with each document I showed her. "Sarah, this is criminal fraud," she said finally. "They've been systematically stealing from you for years. And this insurance policy setup, it's suspicious as hell. What do you recommend?" "We document everything, secure your assets immediately, and then we destroy them legally. But we have to be strategic. If they suspect, they might accelerate whatever timeline they're working on." For the first time since finding those letters, I smiled. "Then let's make sure they never see it coming." Janet and I spent the weekend building an airtight case. She brought in Marcus Chun, a forensic accountant who specialized in tracing hidden assets, and within hours he'd uncovered financial trails that made my head spin. "Your husband is good," Marcus said, pointing to spreadsheets on his laptop. "But he's not forensic accountant good. Look at this." The money trail was more extensive than I'd realized. David hadn't just been skimming from our joint accounts. He'd been systematically underreporting his income from his accounting practice, hiding business assets, and even claiming false business expenses that were actually funding his lifestyle with Mom. "He's been preparing for this divorce for years," Janet said, reviewing the documents. "But here's the thing, all of this financial manipulation works in your favor now that we know about it. He can't claim he needs spousal support when he's been hiding his true income." But the most shocking discovery came when Marcus traced the offshore accounts. "Sarah, your husband has been moving money to the Cayman Islands. Small amounts, but consistent. There's currently about $800,000 in an account under his and your mother's names." $800,000. Almost my entire inheritance from Dad, plus years of my bonuses and salary, sitting in an account I had no access to. "The good news," Janet continued, "is that moving marital assets offshore without spousal consent is illegal. We can get all of this back, plus penalties." I felt a surge of satisfaction. David thought he was so clever with his financial schemes, but he'd actually handed me the evidence I needed to destroy him. "What about the insurance policies?" I asked. Marcus pulled up another screen. "This is interesting. The timing of when he increased your life insurance coverage corresponds with when he started moving money offshore most aggressively. It's almost like he was preparing for my death to be financially beneficial," I finished. The room fell silent. We were all thinking the same thing, but none of us wanted to say it out loud. "We need to be very careful here," Janet said finally. "We're going to move fast to protect you, but we can't tip them off that we know anything." Over the next few days, I became an actress. I went to work, came home to dinner with David and Mom, and played the role of the oblivious wife and daughter. But behind the scenes, Janet and I were systematically dismantling their entire plan. First, we secured my assets. I opened new bank accounts they couldn't access and started redirecting my salary. We filed preliminary paperwork to freeze the offshore accounts and began the process of tracing every dollar they'd stolen. Second, we gathered evidence of the affair. Janet hired a private investigator who confirmed what I already knew. David and Mom were meeting regularly at hotels, restaurants, and even taking weekend trips together while I was traveling for work. But the most damning evidence came from David's own mistakes. While cleaning his office more thoroughly, I found a folder labeled Post-Divorce Plans. Inside were printouts of luxury condos in Florida, travel brochures for European cruises, and financial projections showing how they could live comfortably on my life. Insurance payout combined with the money they'd already hidden. There was even a handwritten note from Mom. "Darling, I can't wait until we don't have to sneak around anymore. Just think soon we'll wake up together every morning in our beautiful new home, and Sarah will be..." The note cut off there, but the implication was clear. I photocopied everything and added it to my growing file. Janet reviewed each piece of evidence with the precision of a surgeon. "They've essentially documented their own crimes," she said. "Financial fraud, conspiracy, and depending on how aggressive we might even be able to pursue criminal charges. How aggressive do you think we should get?" I asked. Janet smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "Sarah, they tried to steal your life savings, destroy your marriage, and possibly worse. I think we should get very aggressive." That night, I lay in bed next to David, listening to him breathe, and felt nothing but cold calculation. The love I felt for this man was completely gone, replaced by determination to make sure he faced consequences for what he'd done. Tomorrow, we would start the counterattack. And unlike David and Mom, we wouldn't underestimate our opponents. The private investigator Janet hired was a woman named Rebecca Torres, a former police detective who specialized in infidelity cases. She was thorough, discreet, and absolutely ruthless when it came to documenting evidence. I've been doing this for 15 years, Rebecca told me during our first meeting. But I have to say, your case is unique. Most affairs are about passion or midlife crisis. This is more like a long-term business partnership designed to defraud you. Rebecca's surveillance over the next 2 weeks provided evidence that was both heartbreaking and legally devastating. Photos of David and Mom holding hands at romantic restaurants. Video of them checking into hotels together. Audio recordings of them discussing their future plans while sitting in David's car outside Mom's doctor's office. But the most damning evidence came from our own home. I'm going to recommend we install some discreet surveillance equipment, Rebecca said. With your consent, of course, since it's your house too. The tiny cameras were virtually invisible, placed in common areas where David and Mom spent time together. Within days, we had hours of footage showing them acting like a couple in my own living room. I watched the videos alone in my office, late at night when I couldn't sleep. Seeing them together like that, kissing in my kitchen, cuddling on my couch, discussing how to handle the Sarah situation was like watching my life dissolve in real-time in one particularly devastating recording. Mom was comforting David about something. I know it's hard, darling, she said, stroking his hair. But Sarah has become so consumed with work. She barely notices us anymore. We're not hurting anyone. Sometimes I feel guilty, David replied. She works so hard to provide for all of the U.S., and we appreciate that, Mom said. But she chose her career over her family. She chose money over love. We found real love together, and that's rare. I had to pause the video and take several deep breaths. They were rewriting history, making me the villain in their love story. According to their narrative, I was the workaholic who neglected my family, and they were the victims who found solace in each other. Never mind that I was working 60-hour weeks to support all three of us. Never mind that David had encouraged me to take on more cases, to travel for work, to pursue the partnership that brought in the money they were now stealing. The financial forensics were equally revealing. Marcus Chan had traced their money movements with frightening precision. Look at this pattern, he showed me on his computer. Every time you got a bonus or a large case settlement, David would move a percentage offshore within days. He's been skimming your success for years. The total amount they'd stolen was staggering, $1.2 million over the past 8 years. Money that should have been building our retirement, paying off our mortgage, securing our future. Instead, it was sitting in accounts preparing for their future without me. But Marcus found something else that made my blood run cold. Sarah, I need to show you something troubling. Look at these life insurance premium payments. He pulled up a spreadsheet showing the payments on various insurance policies. David increased your life insurance coverage 3 times in the past 5 years. Each increase corresponded with a significant uptick in his offshore transfers. What does that mean? It means he was positioning himself to benefit more from your death than from your life. Combined with the fact that he's been systematically moving your assets offshore, it suggests he was preparing for a scenario where you're no longer in the picture. The room felt like it was spinning. Are you saying you think he was planning to kill me? Marcus chose his words carefully. I'm saying the financial evidence suggests he stood to gain significantly more from your death than from divorcing you. That single quotes S. concerning. I needed air. I needed space to process this revelation. The affair was devastating enough, but the possibility that David had been planning something even worse made me physically ill. Rebecca knocked on my office door. Sarah, I have something else you need to see. She handed me a folder of photographs. These were taken yesterday when you were in court. David and your mother went to a jewelry store together. The photos showed them shopping for rings, engagement rings. The store clerk told our contact that they were planning a wedding for later this year. They paid in cash. They were already planning their wedding. While still married to me, while living in my house, while spending my money, they were planning their future together. I stared at the photos until my eyes burned. In one image, Mom was trying on a diamond ring while David watched with an expression of pure adoration, the same expression he used to have when he looked at me. "There's more," Rebecca said gently. "They also visited a real estate agent. They're putting an offer on a condo in Naples, Florida. A cash offer, no doubt, using my stolen money." I closed the folder and looked at Rebecca and Marcus. "How fast can we move on this?" "Fast," Rebecca said. "We have everything we need." "Good," I said, feeling that cold rage settle deeper in my chest, because I want to destroy them before they get the chance to destroy me. Janet and I spent the next week crafting our strategy like generals planning a military campaign. We had overwhelming evidence, but timing would be everything. "We need to hit them when they're most vulnerable," Janet explained. "Ideally, when they're together so they can't coordinate their stories or destroy evidence. I've been tracking their patterns for weeks now. Every Tuesday, David had his business dinner and Mom had her book club, both alibis for their romantic evening together. This Tuesday would be different. I have a plan," I told Janet. "David thinks I'm flying to Atlanta for a deposition on Tuesday morning. Instead, I'll cancel the trip and come home early. I want to catch them in the act. Are you sure you're emotionally ready for that?" I thought about the question seriously. Was I ready to see my husband and mother together in my own home? Was I prepared for the confrontation that would end my marriage and my relationship with my mother forever? I need to see it with my own eyes, I said finally. For 23 years, I trusted them completely. I need to witness their betrayal firsthand so I never doubt my decision to destroy them. Janet nodded. "Then we'll be ready. I'll have all the paperwork prepared. The moment you give me the signal, we'll file for divorce, request asset freezing, and notify the authorities about the financial fraud." The weekend before our planned confrontation was surreal. David and Mom acted completely normal, discussing mundane things like grocery shopping and home repairs. I participated in conversations about repainting the guest bathroom while knowing I was about to blow up all our lives. Sunday night, David was particularly affectionate. He massaged my shoulders while I worked on my laptop and talked about planning a vacation together. "We should go somewhere tropical," he said. "Just the two of us. You've been working so hard lately." I wondered if this sudden interest in alone time was because he and Mom had set a timeline for whatever they were planning. "That sounds nice," I said, "after this Atlanta case is wrapped up." "About that," David said casually. "Mom mentioned she might visit her sister in Jacksonville while you're gone. She hasn't seen Aunt Linda in months." Another lie. Mom's sister Linda had died 3 years ago. I'd spoken at the funeral. "That's a good idea," I said. "She should get out more." Monday morning, I went through the motions of packing for Atlanta. I kissed David goodbye, hugged Mom, and told them I'd see them Wednesday evening. Instead, I drove to a hotel near the airport and spent the day in Janet's office, finalizing our legal strategy. We had divorce papers ready to file, motions to freeze all assets, and criminal complaints prepared for the district attorney's office. "Once we start this process, there's no going back," Janet warned me. "Are you absolutely certain?" I thought about the woman I'd been just 3 weeks ago, trusting, naive, grateful for my loving family. That woman was gone forever, replaced by someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. I'm certain. Tuesday evening, I drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Rebecca was already in position across the street, ready to document whatever we found. Janet was on standby with all our legal paperwork. I parked around the corner and walked to my own front door, using my key to enter as quietly as possible. The house was dim, lit only by candles in the living room. I could hear soft music playing, the same jazz playlist David and I used to listen to during romantic dinners. I followed the sound and the light, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they'd hear it. As I reached the living room doorway, I stopped and took a deep breath. When I stepped into view, I saw exactly what I'd expected, but somehow still wasn't prepared for. David and Mom were slow dancing in our living room, both of them partially undressed. Mom was wearing the lingerie I found receipts for black lace that David had bought her with our money. They were kissing with the passion of new lovers, completely lost in each other. For a moment, I just stood there watching the complete destruction of everything I believed about my life. Then I cleared my throat. "Don't let me interrupt," I said calmly. They sprang apart like teenagers caught by their parents. David's face went white as paper, while Mom clutched at her lace negligee, trying to cover herself. "Sarah," David stammered. "You're supposed to be in Atlanta." "I was supposed to be," I agreed, pulling out my phone to take photos. But my deposition was postponed. Lucky me, I get to come home to this beautiful scene. Mom had found her voice. "Sweetheart, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" I interrupted, still taking pictures. "Because it looks like my husband and my mother are having an affair. In my living room, wearing lingerie bought with my money, while I was supposed to be out of town." The flash from my phone seemed to jolt them back to reality. David grabbed his shirt from the floor while Mom wrapped herself in the throw from our couch, the throw I'd bought for our 5th wedding anniversary. "Let me explain," David started, but I held up my hand. "Actually, let me explain," I said, walking to the mantel where we kept family photos. I picked up our wedding picture, the one where Mom stood beside us, beaming with pride. "I know about the offshore accounts, David. All $800,000 of them." His face went from white to gray. "I know about the secret bank account you and Mom share. I know about the life insurance policies. I know about the Florida condo you're buying together." I set the wedding photo down and turned to face them. "I know about everything." Mom sank onto the couch, her face crumbling. "Sarah, please, let us explain." "Explain what, Mom?" "Explain how you've been systematically stealing from me for 8 years. Explain how you've been planning my husband's divorce while testifying to attorneys about what a devoted son-in-law he is. Or maybe you'd like to explain the engagement ring you picked out together yesterday." The silence in the room was deafening. Both of them stared at me like I was a ghost, which I suppose I was. The ghost of the naive woman they'd been deceiving. "How long?" I asked quietly. They looked at each other, and even in this moment, I could see the silent communication between them. "How long have you been having an affair?" I repeated, my voice getting sharper. 6 months, David said weakly. I laughed, and the sound surprised even me. "Try again." "I have love letters going back 15 years. Mom's shoulders sagged in defeat. "Sarah, you have to understand. 15 years? I continued. 15 years of this? You've been sleeping with my husband since I was in law school? It wasn't supposed to happen," Mom whispered. "After your father died, I was so lonely, and David was so kind to me, so you decided to destroy your daughter's marriage? You were never home." Mom suddenly snapped, her mask slipping completely. "You were always working, always traveling, always putting your career before your family." David needed companionship, and so did I. There it was, the narrative they constructed to justify their betrayal. I was the villain who chose work over family, and they were the victims who found solace in each other. "So this is my fault?" I asked, genuinely curious about their twisted logic. "We didn't mean for it to go this far," David said, finding his voice. "But Sarah, you have to admit we've grown apart. You barely notice when I'm here or not. At least with Margaret, I feel appreciated." "Margaret?" He called my mother by her first name with an intimacy that made my skin crawl. "You feel appreciated," I repeated slowly, while spending my money, living in my house, and planning my replacement. "We were going to tell you," Mom said desperately. "We were working up the courage. To tell me what? That you're in love? That you want a divorce? Or that you've been stealing from me for years while planning to cash in on my life insurance policy?" Both of them went very still. "That's right," I continued. "I know about the insurance increases. The offshore transfers, the whole financial scheme. Did you really think I was too stupid to figure it out? David's lawyer instincts kicked in. Sarah, you're upset, and you're not thinking clearly. Maybe we should all calm down and discuss this rationally. Rationally? I laughed again. David, I am an attorney. I know exactly how to think rationally about evidence. And the evidence suggests that you two have been planning to eliminate me from this equation entirely. That's not true, Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. Then explain the timing of the insurance policies. Explain why you've been moving money offshore in preparation for my death. Explain why you stand to make more money from killing me than from divorcing me. The words hung in the air like poison gas. We all knew I crossed a line by saying it out loud, but we also all knew I was right that Rebecca would be getting all of this on her surveillance equipment from across the street. Janet was probably already filing our legal documents, but right now in this moment, I needed them to understand that their game was over. Pack your things, I said to both of them. Both of you, get out of my house. Sarah, please, David started, but I cut him off. You have 30 minutes to take whatever you can carry. Everything else stays here until the courts sort out what belongs to whom. Which, based on the evidence I have, means you'll be leaving with the clothes on your backs. Mom started crying real tears this time, not the crocodile tears she'd used to manipulate me for years. Where are we supposed to go? She asked. I looked at my mother, this woman who had given birth to me, raised me, and betrayed me more completely than any enemy ever could. I honestly don't care, I said. But you're not staying here another minute. David tried to negotiate. Of course he did. It's what accountants do when caught. Sarah, be reasonable. We can work this out. We don't need lawyers. We don't need to make this ugly. We can handle this like adults. I almost admired his audacity. Even caught red-handed, he was trying to manipulate the situation to his advantage. You're right, I said, pulling out my phone. Let's handle this like adults. I speed-dialed Janet's number. She answered on the first ring. It's time, I said simply. Understood. Everything's being filed as we speak. David's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. Sarah, wait. Too late, I said, ending the call. Divorce papers will be served tomorrow morning. All assets are being frozen pending forensic accounting. The district attorney's office will be receiving a criminal complaint about financial fraud by Friday. Mom had stopped crying and was staring at me with something I'd never seen before fear. You can't do this, David said, his voice rising. Half of everything is mine. I have rights. Actually, you don't, I replied calmly. Marital assets obtained through fraud can be recovered in full. The money you stole from me was never yours to begin with. I walked to the front closet and pulled out 2 suitcases, the ones we've used for our honeymoon in Hawaii 23 years ago. These should be enough for whatever you can pack in 30 minutes, I said, setting them on the floor. The timer starts now. Sarah, please. Mom begged. I'm your mother. You can't throw me out with nowhere to go. The word mother hit me like a physical blow. For 34 years, that word had meant safety, love, unconditional support. Now it just meant betrayal. A mother protects her daughter, I said quietly. A mother doesn't steal from her, lie to her, or sleep with her husband. You stopped being my mother the day you decided David was more important than I was. Mom's face crumpled, but I felt nothing. The woman I loved and trusted was gone, replaced by a stranger who happened to share my DNA. David had recovered some of his composure and was trying a different approach. Sarah, I know you're hurt, but think about this practically. We've been together for 23 years. We have a history, shared assets, shared responsibilities. Margaret depends on us both. Don't throw away decades of partnership over one mistake. One mistake? I repeated. David, you've been stealing from me for 8 years and fucking my mother. For 15, That's not one mistake, that's a career. He flinched at my language. Good. I was done being the polite, accommodating wife who never raised her voice or caused a scene. Besides, I continued, what partnership? You mean the partnership where I work 60-hour weeks while you and Mom plan your future with my money? That partnership is officially dissolved. David's phone buzzed. He looked at it and his face went pale. The bank, he said quietly. Our accounts have been frozen. Not our accounts, I corrected. My accounts. The money you stole is being recovered. The offshore accounts have been frozen by federal order. The secret account you share with Mom is being seized pending investigation. You can't do this, Mom said, but her voice was weak. I'm an attorney who specializes in complex litigation, I reminded her. Of course I can do this. I can do things you haven't even thought of yet. David was scrolling through his phone frantically. Sarah, our credit cards. Also frozen. Along with any cards Mom has that are connected to accounts. With my money in them. The reality of their situation was finally sinking in. Without access to my money, they had nothing. David's accounting practice was small and seasonal. Mom lived on Social Security and the generosity I provided for 15 years. Together, they barely had enough money for a week in a decent hotel. Where are we supposed to live? David asked. I suggest you call one of those divorce attorneys you've been consulting with, I said. Maybe they'll let you sleep in their office. You've been spying on us, Mom accused. I've been gathering evidence of your crimes, I corrected. There's a difference. I walked to the window and looked out at Rebecca's surveillance van. Right on schedule, 3 cars were pulling up to our house. Janet emerged from the first car with a process server. Marcus Chun got out of the second car with boxes of files. The third car contained 2 federal agents I'd never met but Janet had warned me about. Your ride is here, I announced. David looked out the window and saw the convoy. Federal agents? Sarah, what have you done? I reported financial crimes to the appropriate authorities, I said. Moving marital assets offshore without spousal consent is a federal offense. So is tax evasion, which I'm sure they'll find when they audit your business. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Janet with official papers and a federal marshal. Sarah Mitchell? The marshal asked. That's me. We have divorce papers to serve and a warrant to search the premises for evidence of financial fraud. I stepped aside to let them in. David and Mom huddled together on the couch like criminals, which I suppose they were. David Mitchell, the marshal continued, you're being served with divorce papers and a restraining order. Margaret Richardson, you're being served with a civil suit for financial fraud and a restraining order. I watched my husband and mother accept the papers with shaking hands and felt a satisfaction so deep it was almost spiritual. You have 15 minutes to finish packing, I told them. Then you need to leave the premises. Sarah, Mom tried one more time. I'm begging you, don't do this. I'm your mother. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had shaped my entire life until this moment. No, I said finally. You're not. 2 hours later, the house was quiet except for the sound of federal agents cataloging evidence. David and Mom had left with their hastily packed suitcases, but not before Mom made one final attempt to reach whatever was left of my heart. She'd stood in the doorway, suitcase in hand, looking older and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Sarah, I know you hate me right now, but someday you'll understand. Love isn't something you can control. It just happens. Love? I'd said. You think this was about love? David and I never meant to hurt you. We fell in love and we couldn't help ourselves. I'd stared at her, amazed by her ability to rewrite history, even in the face of overwhelming evidence. Mom, you didn't fall in love. You planned a financial crime. You systematically stole from your daughter while convincing her you were helping her. That's not love. That's sociopathy. She'd started crying again. I raised you better than this. The Sarah I know wouldn't destroy her own family over money. That's when I'd shown her the diary. Janet had found it during the search mom's personal journal, hidden in a shoebox in her closet. I'd asked to read it before the agents took it. As evidence. Listen to this, I'd said, opening to a page from 3 years ago, April 15th. David is so much more sophisticated than Sarah gives him credit for. He understands art, literature, fine wine things Sarah is too busy to appreciate. Sometimes I think I should have married a man like David instead of Sarah's. Father, Mom's face had gone white. I'd flipped to another page. June 3rd. Sarah announced another business trip today. She seems almost relieved to be leaving us alone together. Sometimes I wonder if she'd even notice if I disappeared entirely. David certainly notices me. He sees me as a woman, not just as Sarah's mother or Sarah's responsibility. Sarah, stop. But I kept reading. September 10th, David suggested we start planning for our future together. He's been researching places where we could retire comfortably. The life insurance money plus what we've saved would be enough for us to live very well. Sometimes I dream about what it would be like to wake up next to him every morning without having to sneak around. The journal entries painted a picture of calculated planning that went back years. Mom hadn't fallen helplessly in love she'd made. A conscious decision to pursue my husband and steal my life, but the entry that had made me physically sick was from just 6 months ago. David is getting impatient about our timeline. He wants to accelerate our plans, but I keep telling him we need to be careful. Sarah is sharper than we give her credit for, and if she gets suspicious, she could ruin everything. We've worked too hard and come too far to make mistakes now. The insurance policies are in place, the offshore accounts are established, and Sarah trusts us completely. We just need to be patient a little longer. I closed the diary and looked at my mother, really looked at her, for what I knew would be the last time. You weren't helpless victims of love, I'd said. You were predators who targeted me systematically. You studied my schedule, exploited my trust, and planned my destruction. And you did it all while pretending to love me. Mom had tried to speak, but I'd held up my hand. I don't want to hear any more lies. I don't want to hear about love or loneliness or how David made you feel. I want you to leave my house and never contact me again. Sarah, please, if you ever try to reach out to me, I'll have you arrested for violating the restraining order. If you try to contact my friends or colleagues, I'll pursue criminal harassment charges. You no longer exist to me. That's when she'd finally understood that her little girl was gone forever, replaced by someone who wouldn't be manipulated or deceived again. Now, sitting in my kitchen while federal agents worked upstairs, I called. My Aunt Linda's daughter, my cousin Jessica. Sarah. Jessica said warmly, I was just thinking about you. How are things? Not great, I admitted. Jess, I need to ask you something, and it's going to sound strange. Has Mom been in contact with you recently? Your mom? No, not since Aunt Linda's funeral. Why? She told David she was going to visit Linda while I was out of town. There was a pause. Sarah, you know Aunt Linda died 3 years ago, right? I know, I spoke at her funeral. Then why would your mom say she was visiting her? I explained the situation in broad strokes. Jessica listened in stunned silence. Jesus, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I can't believe Margaret would do this to you. I can't either, but the evidence is overwhelming. Is there anything I can do? I thought about it. Actually, yes. If Mom contacts you or any other family members, I need you to let me know immediately. She's going to try to control the narrative, make herself look like the victim. I need people to know the truth. Of course. And Sarah? I know this probably doesn't help right now, but you're doing the right thing. What they did to you was unforgivable. After I hung up, Janet found me in the kitchen. The agents are finished with their initial search, she said. They found enough evidence to pursue federal charges for wire fraud and tax evasion. David's business records show he's been underreporting income for years. Good. There's something else. We found another insurance policy one on your mother's life, with David as the beneficiary. I looked up sharply. What does that mean? It means David has been planning contingencies. If something happened to you, he and your mother would have your life insurance. If something happened to your mother, David would have her life insurance, plus whatever assets they'd accumulated. The implication hit me like a cold wave. David hadn't just been planning to eliminate me from their equation, he'd been planning to eliminate Mom eventually too. He was going to kill her, I said quietly. We can't prove that, Janet said carefully. But the financial evidence suggests he was positioning himself to benefit from multiple scenarios. I thought about Mom probably sitting in some cheap hotel room right now, devastated by the collapse of her perfect plan. She had no idea that David had been planning to betray her. Part of me, a very small part, almost felt sorry for her. The next 3 weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, court appearances, and media attention I hadn't expected. Apparently, a story about a mother and son-in-law stealing from a successful attorney makes for compelling local news. David hired the best divorce attorney. His remaining money could buy a shark named Richard Steinberg who specialized in protecting assets for wealthy clients going through messy divorces. Unfortunately for David, I was a better attorney with better evidence. Our first court appearance was for the preliminary asset freeze. David's lawyer argued that freezing all accounts was excessive and punitive. Your Honor, Steinberg said smoothly. My client has been married to Mrs. Mitchell for 23 years. He's entitled to half of all marital assets, and freezing everything denies him access to his own property. Janet stood up with a stack of documents 6 inches thick. Your Honor, the defendant has been systematically moving marital assets to offshore accounts without his spouse's knowledge or consent. He's hidden income, underreported business earnings, and transferred over $800,000 to accounts the plaintiff cannot access. This isn't about marital property, it's about recovering stolen funds. Judge Morrison, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, reviewed our evidence with obvious interest. Mr. Steinberg, how does your client explain these offshore transfers? David whispered frantically to his lawyer. Steinberg cleared his throat uncomfortably. Your Honor, my client was simply diversifying their investment portfolio. International investments are a common financial strategy. Without his wife's knowledge or consent, Judge Morrison asked dryly, while she was working 60-hour weeks to support their household? Marriage is a partnership, Your Honor. Partners delegate financial responsibilities. Partners don't secretly move money to the Cayman Islands. The judge interrupted. Asset freeze is granted pending full forensic accounting. David's face went gray. Without access to any money, he was essentially homeless and broke. But the real fireworks came when Mom's civil attorney, a public defender since she couldn't afford private counsel, tried to argue that she was an innocent victim of David's manipulation. Your Honor, the young lawyer said earnestly, my client is a 70-year-old widow who was taken advantage of by a sophisticated financial schemer. She trusted Mr. Mitchell to handle her finances appropriately. Janet stood with Mom's own diary in her hands. Your Honor, I'd like to read from the defendant's personal journal. Dated 18 months ago, David showed me how easy it is to move money without Sarah noticing. She's so busy with work, she barely glances at the bank statements I prepare. For her, we've been able to save almost $300,000 for our future together without her suspecting anything. The courtroom was dead silent. That doesn't sound like the writing of an innocent victim. Judge Morrison observed. Mom's single quotes S. lawyer had no response. The criminal proceedings were even more devastating. The federal prosecutor, a stern woman named Catherine Hayes, had built a case that would have impressed me if it weren't destroying my family. Mrs. Mitchell, she said during our pretrial meeting, your husband and mother have been running a sophisticated long-term fraud scheme. This wasn't crimes of passion, this was financial racketeering. She showed me evidence I hadn't even known existed. David had been inflating business expenses and claiming false deductions for years, all while underreporting his actual income. The offshore accounts were part of a complex structure designed to hide money from both the IRS and me. He's been preparing for this divorce for at least 5 years, Hayes explained. All of his financial moves were designed to minimize what you could claim in a divorce settlement while maximizing what he could hide. What kind of sentence are we looking at? Wire fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering carry significant penalties. Your husband is looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison. Your mother will probably get 3 to 5 years as a co-conspirator. The reality of what I'd set in motion was staggering. By the time this was over, David and Mom would lose everything: their freedom, their money, their reputations, their future together. I should have felt guilty about destroying 2 people I'd once loved. Instead, I felt something closer to satisfaction. The breaking point came when David's lawyer made one final desperate play. Steinberg requested a private meeting with me and Janet, hoping to negotiate some kind of settlement. "Look," he said, dropping his courtroom persona, "David knows he's screwed up. He's willing to return the offshore money, give up any claim to marital assets, and accept responsibility for his actions. In exchange, maybe you could consider reducing the criminal charges." "What about my mother?" I asked. "She's willing to testify against David, claims she was manipulated and coerced. You could position her as another victim rather than a co-conspirator." Janet and I exchanged glances. It was a reasonable offer from a legal standpoint. I'd get my money back and destroy David while potentially saving Mom from prison. "No," I said simply. "Sarah, think about this," Steinberg started. I said no. Mom wasn't a victim. She was an active participant who helped plan and execute this fraud. She doesn't get to escape consequences by claiming she was manipulated. "She's your mother." "No," I said firmly. "She's a criminal who happens to share my DNA, and I want her prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." Steinberg looked at Janet. "Can you talk some sense into your client?" "My client is making perfect sense," Janet replied. "Your clients committed serious crimes over many years. They don't get to negotiate their way out of consequences just because they got caught." After they left, Janet asked me the question I'd been dreading. "Are you sure about this, Sarah? Sending your mother to prison is going to have lasting consequences. For you too, there's no coming back from this." I thought about the woman who had raised me, who had taught me right from wrong, who had held me when I was scared and celebrated with me when I succeeded. Then I thought about the woman who had systematically betrayed me for 15 years while smiling to my face. "She made her choice," I said. "Now she gets to live with the consequences." News of the scandal spread through our community like wildfire. Within days, everyone from my law firm colleagues to the neighbors I barely knew had opinions about my situation. The reactions fell into 3 categories: those who supported me completely, those who thought I was being too harsh, and those who were fascinated by the drama but tried to stay neutral. My law firm partners were unanimously supportive. Managing partner Robert Chan called me into his office the day after the story hit the local newspaper. "Sarah, I want you to know that the firm stands behind you completely," he said. "What happened to you is unconscionable, and your response has been both legally sound and personally courageous." "I appreciate that, Robert. I know this kind of publicity isn't great for the firm's image." "Are you kidding? Having an attorney who can build an airtight case against her own family while maintaining perfect legal ethics? That's exactly the kind of reputation we want." The newspaper coverage was more mixed. The initial story focused on the fax attorney. Discovers husband and mother stealing money, files criminal charges. But as the story developed, some reporters started questioning whether my response was proportionate. "Local attorney sends mother to prison." Read one particularly inflammatory headline. The article painted me as a cold, calculating career woman who chose money over family. I found myself defending my actions to people who had no business judging them at the grocery store. I ran into Helen Morrison, a neighbor I'd exchanged pleasantries with for years. "Sarah, I'm so sorry about everything you're going through," she said, but her tone suggested she wasn't entirely sympathetic. "Thank you, Helen. It's just ... Well, Margaret always seemed like such a sweet woman. And David was always so helpful with neighborhood projects. Are you sure this couldn't be worked out privately?" I stared at her. "Helen, they stole over $1 million from me while planning my husband's divorce. What exactly should I have worked out privately?" "Well, family is family. Sometimes we have to forgive. Would you forgive your mother for sleeping with?" "Your husband?" I asked bluntly. Helen's face flushed red. "I just think there might have been other ways to handle this." "Other ways?" "Like quietly accepting betrayal and theft because maintaining family harmony was more important than justice. But for every Helen Morrison, there were two people like my friend Sarah Chun, no relation to Robert, who stopped by my house with wine and moral support." "I can't believe what they did to you," she said as we sat on my back porch. "And I can't believe some people think you should have just forgiven them." "It's the mother thing," I said. "People can't get past the idea that I'm prosecuting my own mother." "Your mother prosecuted herself when she decided to steal from you. You're just making sure she faces consequences." The social media reaction was even more polarized. Someone had created a Facebook group called Justice for Sarah Mitchell that had hundreds of members sharing their own stories of family betrayal. But there was also a smaller group of people posting things like, "Sarah Mitchell, the daughter who destroyed her own family." I tried to stay off social media, but Janet insisted we monitor it for potential harassment or threats. "Unfortunately, your case has become a lightning rod for people's feelings about family loyalty versus personal justice," she explained. "We need to document any threatening behavior." Most of the negative comments were just ignorant opinions, but a few crossed the line into personal attacks. One particularly nasty post from someone using a fake name. Read, "Sarah Mitchell is a heartless bitch who cares more about money than love. Her mother and husband found real happiness together, and she destroyed it out of spite." I screenshot that one and sent it to Janet. Turns out the fake account belonged to David's sister Linda, who was violating the restraining order by posting about me online. "We can have her arrested for this," Janet offered. "Let's start with a cease and desist letter," I said. "But if she escalates, I want her prosecuted too." The most surprising reaction came from my coworkers at opposing law firms. Several attorneys I battled in court over the years reached out with private messages of support. "Sarah," wrote Jennifer Walsh, a family law attorney I'd faced off against in a contentious custody case, "I've been following your situation, and I want you to know that what you're doing takes incredible courage. Too many people let family members abuse them because society tells us blood is thicker than water. You're proving that justice is thicker than blood." That message meant more to me than Jennifer probably realized. The most difficult conversations were with friends who knew David and Mom personally. These were people who had attended dinner parties at our house, who had received Christmas cards from the Mitchell family, who had genuinely liked both of them. My friend Corinne, whose husband golfed with David, struggled the most with the revelations. "I just can't reconcile the David I know with what you're describing," she said over lunch. "He always seemed so devoted to you, so proud of your career. That's what made him such an effective criminal," I explained. "He played the role of supportive husband perfectly while systematically betraying me. But 15 years, Sarah? How could you not know for 15 years? That question haunted me. How had I been so blind? How had I trusted so completely that I never questioned their behavior? I saw what I wanted to see, I admitted. I wanted to believe I had a loving husband and mother who supported my career. I wanted to believe that their closeness was healthy family bonding. I ignored red flags because acknowledging them would have destroyed my entire world. And now? Now my world is destroyed anyway, but at least it's destroyed honestly. I'd rather live with painful truth than comfortable lies. Corinne nodded slowly. I think I understand. It's just ... This is going to change everything. Your whole social circle, your family relationships, everything. She was right. By the time this was over, I'd lose most of my social connections, all of my family relationships, and the life I'd spent 23 years building. But I gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I'd never again be anyone's victim 6 months after that Tuesday night when my world exploded. I sat in a conference room watching David and Mom sign papers that would legally end their access to my life forever. The financial settlement was everything Janet had promised. And more. The forensic accounting had revealed even more hidden assets than we'd originally discovered. Marcus Chun had traced money through a maze of shell companies, faked business expenses, and investment schemes that David had been running for nearly a decade. Total recovery amount, $1.4 million, Marcus announced, sliding the final accounting across the table. That includes the offshore accounts, the secret savings account, recovered business assets, penalties, and interest. David's face was gone. 6 months of legal fees, frozen assets, and impending federal prison time had aged him dramatically. The confident man who used to massage my shoulders and plan our future had been replaced by someone hollow and defeated. Mom looked even worse. She'd been staying in a studio apartment funded by what little remained of her social security after legal fees. The elegant woman who used to host dinner parties and organize charity events now looked like a broken stranger. Additionally, Janet continued, Mr. Mitchell is relinquishing all claims to marital property, including the house, the vacation condo, both vehicles, and all retirement accounts. David's lawyer, his third one, since he could barely afford representation, looked up from the papers. My client wants it noted for the record that he's cooperating fully with these proceedings in hopes of demonstrating his remorse to the federal sentencing judge. Noted, Janet said dryly. Though I should mention that cooperation after getting caught red-handed isn't particularly compelling evidence of remorse. I watched David sign paper after paper, officially transferring back to me everything he'd stolen plus everything we'd accumulated together. The house where we'd planned to grow old together, the vacation property in the mountains, his retirement accounts, even his beloved vintage car collection. Everything was now mine alone at the prenuptial agreement David's lawyer had tried to use, as leverage had backfired spectacularly. The document contained a clause voiding all spousal rights in cases of fraud or criminal behavior. David's own lawyer from 23 years ago had essentially written his divorce settlement for me. The criminal restitution has been calculated separately, Federal Prosecutor Catherine Hayes announced. Mr. Mitchell will owe an additional $400,000 in fines and penalties to the federal government, plus $200,000 in back taxes and interest to the IRS. David looked like he might vomit. Even if he managed to rebuild his accounting practice after serving his prison sentence, he'd be paying restitution for the rest of his life. Mom's settlement was smaller, but no less devastating too. She was losing the security of living in my house, the comfort of the allowance I provided for 15 years, and access to the healthcare benefits I covered through my law firm. Mrs. Richardson will also be surrendering any claim to Mrs. Mitchell's future estate, Janet continued. Any inheritance rights, any family benefits, any claim to support or assistance. I watched my mother sign away her legal right to call herself my family. The woman who had taught me to ride a bike, who had helped me with homework, who had been my maid of honor, she was now legally a stranger to me. The final document was the restraining order which both David and Mom had to acknowledge. No contact with Mrs. Mitchell through any means, Judge Morrison read from the bench later that afternoon. No phone calls, emails, letters, social media contact, or third-party communication. No approaching her home, workplace, or any location where she might reasonably be found. Your Honor, Mom's public defender said quietly, my client would like to address the court. Judge Morrison looked at me. Mrs. Mitchell, are you willing to hear from the defendant? Every eye in the courtroom turned to me. I could hear people holding their breath, waiting to see if I would show mercy to my own mother in her final moment before sentencing. I looked at Mom, really looked at her, and for a split second I saw the woman who had sung me lullabies and taught me to be strong and independent. The woman who had raised me to believe that honesty and hard work were the most important values in life. Then I remembered the diary entries, the secret accounts, the 15 years of systematic betrayal, while she smiled to my face and told me how proud she was of me. No, Your Honor, I don't wish to hear anything she has to say. Mom's shoulders sagged as if I physically struck her. Her lawyer sat down and Judge Morrison moved to sentencing. David Mitchell, you're sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. Margaret Richardson, you are sentenced to 4 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. 12 years, 4 years. By the time they were released, I'd be in my 40s. David would be in his 60s. And Mom would be pushing 80 if she lived that long dot as the bailiffs led them away in handcuffs. David looked back at me one last time. I saw desperation in his eyes, maybe regret, possibly even love. For just a moment, I felt something that might have been pity. Then I remembered the life insurance policies, the offshore accounts, and the cold calculation behind every kiss, every "I love you." Every supportive gesture over 23 years. The pity disappeared outside the courthouse. Reporters were waiting. I prepared a statement with Janet's help, knowing this would be my one chance to control the narrative. Justice has been served today, I said, looking directly into the cameras. No one is above the law, not even family members. I hope this case sends a message that financial abuse and fraud will be prosecuted to the fullest extent, regardless of personal relationships. Mrs. Mitchell, one reporter called out, do you have any regrets about pursuing criminal charges against your own mother? I paused, considering the question seriously. My only regret, I said finally, is that I trusted them long enough for them to steal as much as they did. The first 6 months after the sentencing were the loneliest of my life. The house that had once felt warm and full of love now felt like a museum of betrayal. Every room held memories I could no longer trust. Every photo told a story I now knew. Was fiction. I threw myself into work with an intensity that worried my colleagues. 16-hour days became normal. Weekend court research became my social life. I was building cases with the same methodical precision I've used to destroy David and Mom, but now I was doing it for clients who appreciated my ruthless attention to detail. Sarah, Robert Chun said during one of our monthly partner meetings, your billable hours are impressive, but you need to take some time off. You haven't taken a vacation in over a year. I'm fine, I insisted. Work keeps me focused. Work is also preventing you from processing what you've been through. Consider therapy, consider travel, consider anything that isn't this office. He was right, of course, but I wasn't ready to deal with the emotional aftermath of destroying my entire family. Work was safe. Work made sense. Work didn't lie to me or steal from me or sleep with my husband. The harassment started about 8 months after the sentencing. At first, it was subtle hang-up calls to my office, emails from fake accounts with no actual threats, cars that seemed to follow me, but never got close enough to identify Dot. Then it escalated. Someone broke into my house while I was at work. Nothing was stolen, but items were moved around, pictures turned face down, papers scattered, my bedroom searched. It was a message. We can get to you anywhere. I called Janet immediately. This is a violation of the restraining order, she said, reviewing the police report. If it's David or Margaret, they're going back to prison with additional charges. How would they even know where I live? I asked. They're in federal prison. Prison inmates have access to phones, computers, and friends on the outside. They could be coordinating this from inside. The police investigation revealed that the harassment was coming from David's sister, Linda, the same woman who had posted about me on social media. She'd been recruiting David's friends and extended family to make Sarah pay for destroying innocent people. Detective Maria Santos showed me the evidence they gathered from Linda's phone and computer. She's been organizing what she calls a truth campaign, Detective Santos explained. The idea is to make your life so uncomfortable that you'll drop the criminal charges and let David and Margaret out of prison. The criminal charges have already been adjudicated, I said. They're in federal prison. I can't drop anything even. If I wanted to, Linda either doesn't understand that or doesn't care. She's convinced that you have the power to free them if you choose to. The truth campaign included following me to work, calling my clients with lies about my character, posting flyers around my neighborhood claiming I was a vindictive daughter who had innocent people imprisoned, and even contacting my law school to suggest I cheated my way through my degree. It was pathetic and desperate, but it was also effective at making my life miserable. I want all of them prosecuted, I told Janet. Linda, every person she recruited, everyone who participated in this harassment campaign. That's a lot of people, Sarah. Are you sure you want to go through another round of legal proceedings? I thought about that question. Was I prepared to destroy even more lives to protect my peace of mind? They made their choice when they decided to harass me, I said. Now they get to live with the consequences. The harassment prosecution was swift and devastating. Linda and 6 other people were charged with conspiracy to harass, violation of restraining orders, and in some cases, stalking and criminal trespass. During Linda's sentencing hearing, she made a final desperate plea that revealed just how delusional David's family had become. Your Honor, she said, my brother made a mistake, but he didn't deserve to have his entire life destroyed. Sarah Mitchell is a cold, heartless woman who chose money over family. David and Margaret were in love, and sometimes love makes people do stupid things. Judge Morrison's response was withering. Ms. Mitchell, your brother and his mother-in-law didn't make a mistake. They committed systematic financial fraud over many years while planning to eliminate Mrs. Mitchell from their lives entirely. The only thing they're guilty of is getting caught. Linda received 2 years in prison. The others received sentences ranging from 6 months to 18 months, plus restitution for my legal fees and the cost of installing a security system in my house. As I left the courthouse after Linda's sentencing, I realized something had changed. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt truly safe. Every person who had threatened me, harassed me, or tried to intimidate me was now in prison or under court supervision. The boundaries I'd established weren't just legal documents anymore, they were steel walls that protected me from anyone who thought they could manipulate or control me. I stood on the courthouse steps, breathing deeply for the first time in months. The woman who had been everyone's victim was gone forever. In her place was someone who would never again be anyone's target. Tomorrow I would start building a new life. Tonight, I would go home to my house, legally and completely mine, and plan my future, a future that belonged entirely to me. 2 years after finding those love letters in David's jacket, I stood in the kitchen of my new house, making coffee for one and feeling genuinely happy for the first time in decades. House was smaller than the one I'd shared with David and Mom, but it was entirely mine. Every piece of furniture, every decoration, every choice reflected my taste and my personality, things I'd forgotten. I had during 23 years of compromise and accommodation. I'd sold the old house 6 months after the sentencing, unable to live surrounded by memories of betrayal. The new place was a contemporary townhouse in the Arts District, with clean lines, lots of light, and absolutely no history of deception. My phone buzzed with a text from my friend Sarah Chun. Coffee. Later, I want to hear about your date last night. I smiled, thinking about Daniel, the history professor I'd met at a museum fundraiser. He was kind, intelligent, and refreshingly honest about everything from his divorce to his fear of commitment. After David, I found Daniel's transparency almost exotic. Coffee sounds great, I texted back. And yes, I'll tell you about the date. Dating again had been terrifying at first. How do you trust someone new when the people closest to you have betrayed? You so completely, but my therapist, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, had helped me understand the difference between reasonable caution and paralyzing fear. Sarah, she'd said during one of our sessions, what David and Margaret did to you was horrible, but it doesn't mean everyone will betray you. You can be smart about protecting yourself without assuming every person is a potential criminal. Learning to trust my instincts again had been a long process. I installed security systems, hired investigators to background check potential romantic partners, and kept my financial information completely private. But slowly, carefully, I was building new relationships based on honesty and mutual respect. My law practice had thrived in ways I never expected. Word had spread about the attorney who'd built an airtight case against her own family, and I was getting referrals from clients who needed someone with experience handling complex family fraud cases. You understand betrayal in a way most lawyers don't, one client had told me. You know what it feels like to be victimized by people you trust. I'd specialized in financial fraud and family law, helping other people recover from the kind of systematic abuse I'd experienced. It was emotionally demanding work, but also deeply satisfying. Every case I won felt like a small victory against the David and Mom types of the world. The money I'd recovered had been invested wisely, giving me a financial security I'd never experienced before. Knowing that every dollar in my accounts was legally and ethically mine created a peace of mind that was almost spiritual. I'd also reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. Amazing how many relationships had suffered because David and Mom had monopolized my time and attention. People I'd barely spoken to in years reached out after the news broke, offering support and friendship I'd forgotten I needed. My cousin Jessica had become particularly close. She'd moved to the city for work, and we'd started having regular dinners, building the kind of adult family relationship I thought was impossible. You know what I admire most about what you did? She'd said over wine the week before. You chose justice over comfort. Most people would have tried to work it out quietly to avoid the drama. Justice isn't comfortable, but it's honest. The hardest part of my new life was the absence of the family I thought I had. I still caught myself wanting to call Mom when something good happened at work, or wanting to share a funny story with David. The muscle memory of loving then took a long time to fade. I'd replaced that false family with chosen family friends who supported me, colleagues who respected me, and new relationships built on truth rather than deception. Last month, I'd received a letter from Mom. Despite the restraining order, she'd somehow gotten a message to me through a lawyer. It was full of apologies, explanations, and pleas for forgiveness. Sarah, she'd written, I know you hate me, but I'm still your mother. I made terrible mistakes, but I never stopped loving you. Prison has given me time to think about what I did, and I'm so sorry. When I get out, I hope we can find a way to rebuild our relationship. I'd read the letter once, then handed it to Janet to document the violation of the restraining order. Mom would be getting additional prison time for attempting to contact me. Some people might call that harsh. I called it maintaining boundaries. Standing in my bright, clean kitchen this morning, I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago, exhausted, overworked, grateful for a family that was systematically destroying her. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, smarter, and infinitely more selective about who she allowed into her life. My phone rang. It was Daniel. Good morning, beautiful, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I was thinking about our conversation last night. Would you like to take that weekend trip to the mountains we talked about? I'd love to. I said, surprising myself with how easily the words came. 2 years ago, I would have asked David's permission, checked, with Mom's schedule, worried about leaving them alone together. Now I made my own decisions based on my own desires. Perfect, Angel said. I'll book us separate rooms, of course. I laughed. Daniel understood my need for independence and space. He didn't push for faster intimacy or try to rush past my boundaries. He was patient, respectful, and honest qualities I'd learned to value above all others. After we hung up, I walked to the window and looked out at my garden. I planted it myself last spring, vegetables and flowers that I'd chosen, arranged according to my vision, tended with my own hands. Everything in my life now is authentic, earned, and entirely my own. The woman who had discovered love letters in her husband's jacket was gone. In her place was someone who would never again be anyone's victim, anyone's convenience, or anyone's fool. I raised my coffee cup in a toast to the morning sun, to my new life, and to the hard-won wisdom that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be destroyed by the people who claim to love you. Some people might call what I did to David and Mom revenge. I call it justice. And justice, I've learned, is the foundation of every healthy relationship I'll ever have. The phoenix had risen from the ashes of betrayal, and she was magnificent. Share your own stories of family betrayal and how you found the strength to overcome them in the comments below. Remember, you deserve relationships built on honesty and respect, not manipulation and lies.